The cold vacuum of space stretched endlessly in all directions. Among the scattered pieces of twisted metal and broken machinery, a small emergency pod drifted silently through the darkness. Inside the cramped capsule, Zethkar pressed his scaled hands against the frosted viewing port and stared at the distant stars. 3 days had passed since his ship exploded. 3 days of floating alone in the void with nothing but his thoughts and the steady beeping of his distress beacon. The sound had become torture to his ears, but he could not turn it off. It was his only hope of rescue, though that hope grew smaller with each passing hour. Zethkar belonged to the Vorthak Empire, a race of proud warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds across the galaxy. His people valued strength above all else. They fought for honor, for glory, for the right to rule over the weak. But there was no honor in floating helplessly in a broken pod, waiting for death or rescue. The warrior's stomach twisted with shame. If his family could see him now, they would turn their backs in disgust. A true Vorthak would rather die than beg for help from strangers. Yet here he was, broadcasting his weakness to anyone who might be listening. His ship, the Talshara, had been on a routine mission to survey a distant star system. Zethkar had been alone, as was proper for a reconnaissance mission. The engine had failed without warning, and the reactor core had overloaded before he could reach the escape pods. Only his quick reflexes had saved him from being vaporized, with the rest of his vessel. The emergency pod's life support systems hummed quietly, but he knew they would not last much longer. The air was already growing stale, and the temperature controls were failing. Soon the cold of space would seep through the hull and freeze him solid. Perhaps that would be a more honorable death than starving slowly while waiting for rescue. Zethkar closed his eyes and tried to meditate, as his warrior training had taught him. He thought of his homeworld with its red skies and jagged mountains. He remembered his first battle, when he had proven himself worthy of the warrior caste. He recalled the faces of his enemies as they fell before his weapons. But the memories brought no comfort. All his strength, all his training, all his victories meant nothing now. He was just another piece of debris floating in the emptiness between stars. Meanwhile, far across the solar system, the human exploration vessel Liberty moved through space at a steady pace. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair, reading reports from the ship's various departments. The Liberty was on a long-range exploration mission, mapping star systems and looking for signs of habitable worlds. The ship was not large by human standards, but it was well equipped for its mission. It carried a crew of 200, including scientists, engineers, and security personnel. Most of them were volunteers who had signed up for the chance to explore the unknown regions of space. Dr. Lisa Grant worked in the ship's science lab, analyzing data from their recent survey of an asteroid field. She was a xenobiologist, a scientist, who studied alien life forms. So far they had found only simple microorganisms, but she remained hopeful that they would discover something more interesting. Commander Ryan Bell stood at the tactical station on the bridge, monitoring the ship's sensors for any signs of danger. The Liberty was far from human space, in regions that had never been explored before. They had to be ready for anything. "Captain," called out Lieutenant Dan Walsh from the communications station. "I'm picking up a strange signal on the long-range sensors." Morrison looked up from his reports. "What kind of signal?" "It appears to be a distress beacon, sir. But the frequency is unlike anything in our databases. It's definitely not human." The captain stood up and walked over to the communications station. "Are you certain it's a distress signal?" Walsh nodded. "The pattern is consistent with emergency broadcasts, sir. Someone is in trouble out there." Dr. Grant heard the conversation from her nearby workstation and came over to look at the data. "The signal is coming from the edge of this system," she said. "It's been broadcasting for several days based on the signal strength." Commander Bell frowned. "It could be a trap, Captain. We don't know what's out there." Morrison studied the readings on the screen. As a Starfleet officer, he had been trained to be cautious when encountering unknown situations, but he had also been taught that saving lives was always the highest priority. "What's your assessment, Doctor?" he asked Grant. "The signal shows signs of power fluctuation," she replied. If this is a distress call, whoever is sending it is running out of time. The captain thought for a moment. The Liberty's mission was exploration, not rescue operations. They were far from any backup, and they had no idea what they might be walking into. But someone was in trouble, and they were the only ones who could help. Set a course for the signal source, Morrison ordered. Maximum speed. Sir, are you sure about this? Bell asked. We don't know anything about who sent that signal. It could be hostile. Morrison looked at his tactical officer. Commander, someone is dying out there. That's all I need to know. The Liberty changed course and accelerated toward the source of the mysterious signal. In the engine room, the crew worked to squeeze every bit of speed from the ship's drives. Time was running out for whoever was broadcasting that desperate call for help. As the ship raced through space, none of the crew could have imagined that they were about to make first contact with an alien species. They certainly could not have predicted that this simple act of mercy would change the course of galactic history. The rescue was still hours away, but for the first time in days, Zethkar's distress beacon was about to receive an answer. The Liberty dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the debris field. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the main screen as the ship's sensors swept the area. Twisted pieces of metal floated in the darkness, the remains of what had once been a starship. There, said Lieutenant Walsh, pointing to a small blip on his screen. The signal is coming from that pod. Morrison could see it now, a tiny capsule spinning slowly among the wreckage. It looked damaged, with scorch marks along its hull and one side partially crushed. Whoever was inside had been through hell. Life signs? Asked the captain. Dr. Grant checked her readings. I'm detecting one life form. The readings are strange, not human, but definitely alive. Barely. Commander Bell studied the tactical display. Captain, that debris field could hide other ships. This might be an ambush. Morrison nodded. Keep the shields up and weapons ready. But we're not leaving without that survivor. Inside the escaper pod, Zethkar felt his heart skip a beat as a massive shape appeared outside his viewport. The alien vessel was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was smooth and white, with gentle curves instead of the sharp angles that Vorthak ships favored. Strange markings covered its hull, symbols he did not recognize. For a moment, hope flared in his chest. Then reality set in. These aliens had found him helpless and weak. In Vorthak culture, that meant only one thing. They would either kill him outright or make him a slave. Either option was better than dying slowly in this broken pod. Zethkar tried to sit up straighter, to face his fate with some dignity. His warrior training told him to prepare for battle, but he had no weapons and could barely move. All he could do was wait and see what these creatures wanted with him. On the Liberty, the rescue team prepared to bring the alien aboard. Dr. Grant gathered her medical equipment while security officers checked their weapons. They had no idea what they might find inside that pod. The pod's atmosphere is different from ours, Grant reported. Higher nitrogen content, less oxygen, but it should be safe for us to breathe for short periods. Captain Morrison activated the ship's communication system. Attention, unknown vessel. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth ship Liberty. We have received your distress signal and are here to help. Please respond if you can hear this message. Inside the pod? Zethkar heard the strange sounds coming from his communication system. The language was completely alien to him, but the tone seemed calm, almost gentle. This confused him. When Vorthak warriors found enemies in distress, they usually roared challenges or demands for surrender. The alien captain spoke again, repeating the same message. Zethkar wished he could understand what they were saying. Were they offering terms for his surrender? Demanding information about Vorthak military secrets? Or were they simply enjoying his helplessness before they killed him? No, response, reported Walsh. Either they can't understand us or they're too weak to answer. Morrison made his decision. Bring them aboard, medical team to the docking bay, security team as well, just in case. The Liberty's tractor beam locked onto the escape pod and pulled it into the ship's docking bay. As the massive doors closed and the bay filled with breathable atmosphere, the rescue team moved into position. Dr. Grant approached the pod carefully, her medical scanner in one hand and a communicator in the other. The life signs are very weak, she said. Whoever is in there needs immediate medical attention. The pod's hatch was damaged and would not open normally. Two engineers worked with cutting tools to create an opening large enough for someone to get through. When the hatch finally opened, everyone stepped back in shock. The creature inside was huge, nearly 8 feet tall even while sitting down. His skin was covered in dark green scales, and his face had sharp features that reminded the humans of ancient Earth reptiles. Zethkar looked at the aliens surrounding him and felt his warrior instincts kick in. These creatures were small and soft-looking with pale skin and strange fur on their heads. They carried weapons, but the weapons were lowered, not pointed at him. Their behavior made no sense. Dr. Grant stepped forward slowly, her hands empty and visible. "Easy there," she said in a calm voice. "We're here to help." The alien warrior tried to stand up, but his legs gave out and he collapsed back into his seat. He was clearly weak from days without proper food or water. Grant turned to her medical team. "Get a stretcher, and be careful. He's much larger than we expected." Zethkar watched in amazement as the small aliens worked together to lift him onto a platform with wheels. In his culture, only family members helped the wounded. Enemies were left to die or killed to end their suffering. These creatures had no reason to help him, yet they were being gentle and careful. They moved him through corridors filled with bright lights and strange sounds. Everything was clean and organized, very different from the dark, harsh designs of fourth-act ships. The walls were painted in soft colors, and there were pictures of landscapes that looked peaceful and beautiful. In the medical bay, Dr. Grant began examining her unusual patient. Her scanners showed that his internal organs were arranged differently from humans, but the basic functions were similar. He was suffering from dehydration, malnutrition, and radiation poisoning. "We need to start treatment immediately," she told her team. "But we'll have to guess at the dosages. We've never treated this species before." Zethkar lay on the medical table, watching the aliens work around him. The female seemed to be in charge of his care. She spoke to him in gentle tones, even though he could not understand her words. Her actions were those of a healer, not a torturer. This made no sense to him. Why would enemies waste time and resources healing someone they planned to kill or enslave? In Vorthak society, mercy was seen as weakness, yet these aliens seemed genuinely concerned about his welfare. Dr. Grant noticed that her patient was watching her carefully. "Can you understand me?" she asked, speaking slowly and clearly. Zethkar tried to respond, but only harsh sounds came from his throat. The alien language was too different from his own. Grant had an idea. She picked up a tablet computer and began drawing simple pictures on the screen. First, she drew a stick figure lying down, then the same figure standing up and looking healthy. The alien warrior understood immediately. She was showing him that they wanted to help him get better. But why? What did they want in return? He tried to communicate back, pointing to himself and then making gestures. But the aliens just looked confused. It would take time to establish any real communication. For now, Zethkar had to trust these strange, soft creatures who had pulled him from the darkness of space. It went against everything he had been taught about dealing with other species. But as the alien healer continued working to save his life, he began to wonder if maybe his people had been wrong about some things. The rescue was complete, but the real challenge was just beginning. Two very different species were about to learn about each other in ways neither could have imagined. 2 weeks had passed since the rescue, and Zethkar was much stronger now. Dr. Grant's careful treatment had healed most of his injuries, though he still felt weak from his ordeal. The alien warrior spent his days in the ship's guest quarters, trying to understand these strange creatures who had saved his life. The humans had given him a small computer that could translate basic words between their languages. It was slow work, but each day he learned more about his rescuers. What he discovered confused him more than anything else in his long life as a warrior. These humans seemed to care about each other in ways that made no sense to Vorthak thinking. He watched through his room's window as crew members worked together on repairs. When one person made a mistake, others helped fix it instead of punishing the failure. When someone got hurt during the work, everyone stopped to make sure they were okay. Captain Morrison visited him every day to check on his progress. The human leader always asked if Zethkar needed anything, if he was comfortable, if the food was acceptable. This behavior puzzled the alien warrior greatly. In Vorthak culture, leaders took from their followers. They did not serve them. "Why do you help me?" Zethkar asked one day, using the translation device to speak with Morrison. "I am your enemy. My people would kill you." Morrison sat down across from the large alien. "You're not my enemy," he said simply. "You needed help, so we helped. That's what decent people do." Decent? The word did not translate well. Zethkar struggled to understand its meaning. "It means doing the right thing even when it's hard or dangerous," Morrison explained. "Helping others because it's the right thing to do, not because you get something in return." This concept was completely foreign to Zethkar. In his world, everything was about power and advantage. You helped others only if they could help you back or if they were family. The idea of helping strangers for no reason seemed like madness. Dr. Grant spent hours with him each day, not just checking his health but trying to learn about his species. She was fascinated by the differences between humans and Vorthak, asking endless questions about his homeworld, his culture, his biology. "Your people are warriors," she said during one of their conversations. "But what do you fight for?" "Glory," Zethkar replied without hesitation. "Honor. The right to rule over the weak," Grant frowned. "Rule over them? Why?" "Because we are strong, and they are not. The strong should lead. The weak should follow or die." The human doctor was quiet for a moment. "On Earth, we used to think like that too. Long ago, the strong did, rule over the weak. But we learned that everyone has value, even those who seem weak. Some of our greatest leaders were people who seemed weak at first." She showed him pictures on her computer, images of Earth's history, of wars and peace treaties, of people working together to build great cities and explore space. She told him stories of humans who had sacrificed themselves to save others, of weak people who had become heroes through courage and kindness. Zethkar listened to these stories with growing amazement. The humans seemed to believe that protecting others made you stronger, not weaker. This went against everything he had been taught. Commander Bell began teaching him about human military tactics. The alien warrior expected lessons about conquest and domination, but instead learned about defense and protection. "Our military exists to protect people," Bell explained. "We fight when we have to, but only to defend ourselves or help others who can't defend themselves." "You do not conquer new worlds?" Zethkar asked. "No. We explore, we make friends, we trade. But we don't take over other people's homes." This was perhaps the most shocking thing Zethkar had heard yet. The Vorthak Empire existed by conquering weaker species and forcing them to serve. The idea of meeting other people and not trying to control them seemed impossible. One evening, Captain Morrison invited Zethkar to eat dinner with the senior officers. The alien warrior had been eating alone in his quarters, but Morrison thought it was time for him to meet more of the crew. The dinner was unlike anything Zethkar had experienced. The humans talked and laughed together like old friends. They told stories about their families back on Earth, shared jokes, and discussed their hopes for the future. Officers and regular crew members sat at the same table, treating each other as equals. "Tell us about your homeworld," Dr. Grant asked. "What is it like?" Zethkar described his planet's red skies and harsh landscape. He told them about the great cities where Vorthak warriors lived and the smaller settlements where conquered peoples worked to serve the Empire. "Do the conquered people ever rebel?" asked Bell. "Sometimes," Zethkar admitted. "But they are crushed quickly. Rebellion is weakness. It shows they do not accept their proper place." The humans exchanged uncomfortable looks. Morrison spoke carefully. "What if their proper place isn't really proper? What if they deserve to be free?" "Free?" Zethkar struggled with the concept. "Free to do what? Without strong leaders, they would destroy themselves." "Free to make their own choices," Morrison said. "To live their own lives, raise their families, pursue their dreams." Dr. Grant added, "Some of humanity's greatest achievements came from People who were once considered inferior. Artists, scientists, leaders who changed our whole civilization. If we had kept them as slaves, we never would have built ships like this one or learned to travel between the stars. That night, Zethkar lay in his bed thinking about everything he had learned. These humans had shown him kindness, without expecting anything in return. They worked together instead of fighting each other for dominance. They explored the galaxy to make friends, not to conquer enemies. Most disturbing of all, they seemed genuinely happy. The Vorthak were always angry, always fighting, always trying to prove their strength. But these humans laughed and smiled and helped each other. They found joy in simple things like sharing a meal or learning something new. A few days later, the ship encountered a dangerous space storm. The Liberty shook violently as it was hit by waves of radiation and electromagnetic energy. In the engine room, several crew members were injured when a power conduit exploded. Zethkar heard the emergency alarms and saw crew members running through the corridors. Despite his own safety, he left his quarters and went to see if he could help. He found Dr. Grant working frantically to treat the injured engineers. "Let me help," he said, kneeling beside her. Grant looked surprised but nodded. "Hold this bandage in place while I work on his other injuries." For the next several hours, Zethkar worked alongside the human medical team. His great strength allowed him to lift heavy equipment and move injured crew members. His knowledge of this region of space helped the navigation team find a safe path through the storm. When the crisis was over, Captain Morrison found Zethkar helping to clean up the medical bay. "Thank you," Morrison said. "You didn't have to help us." Zethkar paused in his work. "Yes, I did," he said quietly. "You saved my life. Now you are my family." It was the closest word he could find in his language for what these humans had become to him. Not conquerors or slaves, not allies or enemies, but something entirely new. People who cared about him and whom he cared about in return. For the first time in his life, Zethkar understood what it meant to be part of something larger than himself, not through dominance or fear, but through choice and mutual respect. It was a lesson that would change everything he thought he knew about strength, honor, and what it truly meant to be a warrior. The alarm on the Liberty's bridge sounded like nothing the crew had ever heard before. Lieutenant Walsh looked up from his station with fear in his eyes. "Captain, we have a problem," he said. "Large ship approaching fast. It's not like anything in our database." Captain Morrison rushed to the main screen. A massive vessel was coming toward them, dark and angular with weapon ports glowing red along its hull. It looked like it was built for war, with sharp edges and spikes covering every surface. "It's beautiful," Zethkar said quietly from behind them. Everyone turned to see the alien warrior standing at the bridge entrance. His face showed a mixture of pride and sadness as he looked at the approaching ship. "You know this vessel?" Morrison asked. "It is the Demon's Claw," Zethkar replied. "A Vorthak battlecruiser. War leader Krexmar commands it. He was sent to find me." Commander Bell checked his tactical display. "Captain, that ship has enough firepower to destroy us 10 times over. We need to get out of here." "No," said Zethkar firmly. "Krexmar will hunt you across the galaxy if you run. The only way to survive is to face him with honor." Morrison studied the alien ship on his screen. "What does he want?" "Me," Zethkar answered, "and probably your deaths. My people do not understand mercy. They will think you captured me or made me your slave." The communication system crackled to life. A harsh, angry voice spoke in the Vorthak language. Even without understanding the words, the humans could hear the rage and disgust in the speaker's tone. Zethkar stepped forward. "War leader Krexmar demands to speak with your leader. He wants to know why you have taken a Vorthak warrior prisoner." "Tell him I'll speak with him," Morrison said, "and make it clear that you're not our prisoner." Zethkar activated the communication system and spoke in his native language. The conversation that followed was heated, with both aliens raising their voices. Finally, Zethkar turned back to the humans. "He does not believe you rescued me freely. He thinks you are lying to gain some advantage. Krexmar says he will destroy your ship and take me back by force." Dr. Grant had joined them on the bridge. "Can't you explain what really happened? Tell him how we helped you?" "I tried," Zethkar said sadly. "But Krexmar cannot understand why anyone would help an enemy without demanding payment. In his mind, all species are either conquerors or victims. There is no middle ground." The Vorthak ship moved closer, its weapons charging. Red energy began to glow brighter along its hull as it prepared to fire. Morrison activated the ship's communication system. "War Leader Krexmar, this is Captain Morrison. We mean no harm to you or your warrior. We rescued Zethkar from certain death and have treated him with honor and respect." Krexmar's voice boomed through the speakers, even though the humans could not understand his words. Zethkar translated. "He says you lie. He says no species would help another without expecting something in return. He believes you have made me weak and filled my head with false ideas." "What kind of false ideas?" asked Bell. Zethkar looked uncomfortable. "Ideas about cooperation, about helping others, about strength coming from protecting the weak instead of conquering them." Morrison realized the problem. Everything the humans had taught Zethkar went against Vorthak culture. To his own people, the alien warrior would seem corrupted or brainwashed. "There has to be a way to make him understand," Dr. Grant said. Zethkar was quiet for a moment, thinking hard. Then his eyes widened as an idea came to him. "There is one way," he said slowly. "I can invoke the right of challenge. It is an ancient law that allows any Vorthak to settle disputes through personal combat." "You want to fight him?" Morrison asked. "Not him," Zethkar replied. "I want to challenge his beliefs. I can demand that he prove his accusations against you through trial by combat. But the combat will not be between warriors. It will be between ideas." Bell looked confused. "How do you fight ideas?" "By showing which ones are stronger," Zethkar explained. "I will propose a test. If humans truly are weak and selfish as Krexmar believes, they will fail the test. If they are strong and honorable as I have learned, they will succeed." Morrison didn't like the sound of this. "What kind of test?" Before Zethkar could answer, the Liberty shook violently. Krexmar had fired, a warning shot across their bow. The next shot would not miss. "Captain," Walsh called out, "3 more ships just dropped out of hyperspace. They're human vessels." Admiral Kate Stone's voice came over the communication system. "Liberty, this is Admiral Stone aboard the Endeavour. We received your distress call and came as quickly as we could." Morrison felt relieved but also worried. Now there were 2 fleets facing each other, 1 human and 1 Vorthak. Any wrong move could start a war. "Admiral, we have a situation here," Morrison explained quickly. "We rescued an alien survivor, but his people think we captured him." "Understood, Captain. We're here to help, but we don't want to start a fight." Krexmar's voice thundered over the communication system again. He was clearly angry about the arrival of more human ships. "He says this proves you are planning an attack," Zethkar translated. "The presence of your fleet makes him think this was all a trap." Admiral Stone's ships moved into defensive positions, but they kept their weapons powered down. Morrison could see that both sides were trying to avoid violence, but the situation was getting worse by the minute. "I have to go back with him," Zethkar said quietly. "It is the only way to prevent a war between our peoples." "No," Dr. Grant said firmly. "We won't let him take you by force. And we won't abandon you," Morrison added. "You're part of our crew. Now." Zethkar looked at these humans who were willing to risk their lives for him. A few weeks ago he would have seen this as weakness. Now he understood it was the greatest strength of all. "Then I challenge Krexmar," he announced, activating the communication system. He spoke in his own language, his voice carrying the formal tones of an ancient ritual. The Vorthak war leader's response was immediate and angry. The conversation went on for several minutes, with both voices growing louder and more heated. Finally, Zethkar turned back to his human friends. "It is done. Krexmar has accepted my challenge, but the test I have proposed will be dangerous for all of us." "What test?" Morrison asked. Zethkar pointed to the main screen, where long-range sensors were detecting something new. A massive solar, Flare was building in the nearby star, growing larger and more dangerous with each passing moment. "That," he said, "when the flare hits, both fleets will be in danger. I have challenged Krexmar to see how each of our peoples responds to the crisis. Will the Vorthak save only themselves, as is our tradition, or will the humans try to save everyone, even their enemies?" Morrison stared at the growing energy storm on the screen. In a few hours, it would reach them with enough power to destroy any ship caught in its path. "And if we fail this test?" he asked. "Then Krexmar will have the right to destroy your fleet and take me back to face execution for betraying my people." The bridge fell silent as everyone realized what was at stake. They had to prove that human values were not weakness, but strength. They had to show that helping others, even enemies, was the mark of a truly advanced civilization. The solar flare continued to grow, and time was running out. The solar flare burst from the star like an angry beast, sending waves of deadly radiation and energy toward both fleets. On the main screen of the Liberty, the crew watched the wall of destruction racing toward them at incredible speed. Impact. In 40 minutes, Lieutenant Walsh reported. "All ships are in danger." Captain Morrison looked at the tactical display showing both human and Vorthak vessels scattered across the area. Some were closer to the flare than others, but none would escape unharmed without help. "Admiral Stone," Morrison called over the communication system. "We need to coordinate our shield frequencies and share power with any ships that can't protect themselves." "Agreed, Captain," came the reply. "All human vessels, prepare for emergency rescue operations." On the bridge of the Demon's Claw, War Leader Krexmar watched his own tactical display with cold eyes. 3 of his smaller ships were directly in the path of the solar storm. In Vorthak tradition, the weak ships would be abandoned to save the strong ones. "War Leader," his second-in-command reported. "The escort vessels request permission to dock with our ship for protection." Krexmar's face showed no emotion. "Denied. If their ships cannot survive, then they are not worthy warriors. We will remember their deaths with honor." The doomed Vorthak. Crews received their death sentence in silence. They had always known that weakness meant death in their culture. They would face the end with dignity, as proper warriors should. But something unexpected happened next. Admiral Stone's voice came, over the open communication channels, speaking slowly so that Zethkar could translate for the Vorthak. "War Leader Krexmar, our sensors show that some of your ships are in immediate danger. We're prepared to extend our shields to protect them if you'll allow us to move closer." Krexmar stared at his communication console in disbelief. These humans were offering to risk their own lives to save Vorthak warriors. It made no sense at all. "Tell the human admiral," he said to his translator, "that we do not need help from weaklings and cowards." But even as he spoke the words, Krexmar felt uncertain. Were these humans really cowards, or was their willingness to help others a different kind of courage? On the Liberty, Captain Morrison was already moving his ship toward the nearest damaged Vorthak vessel. Dr. Grant worked frantically to modify their shield generators to protect a larger area. "Captain," Commander Bell warned, "if we extend our shields that far, we'll be vulnerable ourselves. One hit could destroy us." Morrison never hesitated. "Do it anyway. We're not letting anyone die if we can help it." Zethkar watched from the bridge as the human ships moved into formation around the threatened Vorthak vessels. Each human captain was risking everything to save people who had been ready to kill them minutes before. "Why?" he whispered to himself. "Why do they do this?" Dr. Grant heard him and smiled. "Because it's who we are. We help others because we choose to, not because we have to." The solar flare struck the first ships in its path like a hammer blow. The Vorthak escort vessel, Talon's Edge, took the full force of the energy storm. Its shields failed immediately, and its hull began to crack under the assault. But then something amazing happened. The human ship Endeavor moved alongside the dying Vorthak vessel and wrapped it in protective energy. Admiral Stone's shields held firm, protecting both ships from destruction. Across the battlefield, the same scene played out again and again. Human vessels moved to protect Vorthak ships, sharing their power and risking their own survival to save their former enemies. War Leader Krexmar watched in stunned silence as his warriors were saved by the people he had called weak and cowardly. When the captain of the Talon's Edge reported that his crew was safe thanks to human intervention, Krexmar felt something he had never experienced before. Shame. The solar storm continued for 20 minutes that felt like hours. When it finally passed, both fleets were still intact. Not a single ship had been lost, though several Vorthak vessels would have been destroyed without human help. Krexmar opened a communication channel to the Liberty. When Captain Morrison appeared on his screen, the war leader struggled to find words. "Human captain," he said slowly, "your actions today, they do not make sense to me." "Why don't they make sense?" Morrison asked. "You saved warriors who would have killed you. You risked your own lives for enemies who showed you no mercy. This is not logical behavior." Morrison smiled. "Maybe logic isn't everything, war leader. Maybe sometimes you have to do what's right, even when it doesn't make logical sense." Zethkar stepped into view of the communication screen. "Krexmar, these humans have shown me something I never understood before. True strength doesn't come from conquering others. It comes from protecting them." The war leader's face showed confusion and anger. "You speak like a weakling, Zethkar. These aliens have corrupted your warrior spirit." "No," Zethkar replied firmly. "They have shown me what a real warrior should be. Someone who fights to protect others, not to dominate them." Dr. Grant joined the conversation. "War leader Krexmar, we don't expect you to understand our ways immediately, but we hope you'll consider that there might be strength in cooperation, as well as conquest." Krexmar was quiet for a long time. Around him, his bridge crew waited to see what their leader would decide. Finally, he spoke. "I have seen something today that challenges everything I believed about strength and weakness. You humans fought harder to save us than most Vorthak fight to save themselves." He paused, clearly struggling with concepts that were completely foreign to his culture. "I will not attack your ships," he continued, "and I will not take Zethkar by force. What I have witnessed here requires consideration." Captain Morrison felt relief wash over him. "We're glad to hear that, war leader. If you're willing, we'd like to open formal diplomatic relations between our peoples." "Diplomatic relations?" Krexmar frowned. "We do not negotiate with other species. We conquer them, or we destroy them." Admiral Stone's voice joined the conversation. "Perhaps it's time to try a different approach. From what we've seen today, your people are brave and honorable. We could accomplish great things working together instead of fighting." Zethkar spoke up again. "Krexmar, I wish to stay with the humans and learn more about their ways. I want to become a bridge between our peoples, to help both sides understand each other." The war leader stared at his former subordinate. In the old days, he would have killed Zethkar for such treasonous words, but today had changed something deep inside him. "Very well," he said finally. "You may stay with these humans and study their strange customs, but you will also teach them about Vorthak honor and strength. Perhaps both peoples can learn from each other." 3 months later, Zethkar stood on the bridge of the Liberty as it approached a space station at the edge of human territory. The station had been built specifically for meetings between humans and Vorthak, a place where both species could come together in peace. War leader Krexmar's ship was already docked at the station, along with several other Vorthak vessels. Some of his people had volunteered to work alongside humans, curious about these strange aliens who valued cooperation over conquest. "Are you ready for this?" Captain Morrison asked. Zethkar nodded. "I am ready to help my people learn what you taught me. That true strength comes not from the power to destroy, but from the courage to protect and help others." Dr. Grant smiled. "It won't be easy. Changing the thinking of an entire civilization takes time. All great journeys begin with a single step," Zethkar replied, using a human saying he had learned. "Today, both our peoples take that step together." As the Liberty docked with the station, Zethkar thought about how much his life had changed. Since that desperate day when he floated alone in space, he had been rescued by strangers who became friends, enemies who became allies, and people who showed him that the universe was full of possibilities he had never imagined. The galaxy was still a dangerous place, full of conflict and misunderstanding. But now there was hope that different species could work together, learn from each other, and build something better than what existed before. It all started with a simple choice to answer a distress call from someone in need. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could change the course of history itself.